Welcome to the Australian Finance Podcast, a podcast for people who want to learn more about their personal finances and get the most from their money. This series is hosted by Kate Campbell from How to Money and Owen Raskovich from Rask Finance.
The Australian Finance Podcast is provided for educational purposes only. The information is general in nature and does not take into account your needs, goals, or objectives. What that means is the information does not apply to you specifically. So consider getting the advice of a licensed and trusted professional before acting on the information. Kate, welcome to this episode of the Australian Finance Podcast. What are we talking about today?
An episode that I've wanted to do for a while, negotiating your salary.
Cool. I like it.
Whether it's you're starting a new job and you're negotiating a salary, you're trying to get a pay rise, or maybe you're upgrading your position in your current job.
I like this a lot. When I read what we were talking about, all I read was negotiating. I'm like, negotiating what? Then I read salary. I'm like, this is a really relevant episode. Because anyone can take the advice we're about to give them and use it. It's not like, this is how you invest. This is the account you need, blah, 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 blah. This is your salary we're talking about. Anyone can negotiate or at least try to.
And like we were talking about before the episode, a lot of the investing things, they actually take a bit of work to set up and get started. But if you negotiate your salary and get a 5% pay rise, that's an instant 5% return. That's awesome.
That's it. And if you keep your job, it's ongoing. Yeah, that's awesome. So what we're going to talk about is ways to go about maximizing your chances of getting a pay rise.
Yeah.
Right.
Approaching that conversation, sort of talking yourself out of these common excuses and some of the things you need to know about and understand when going for a pay rise.
Yep, I like it.
And I think we're coming at it from two different perspectives. Myself as an employee who has gone through this a few times in the workplace and has had the same anxiety of, they won't give it to me. That's too much. Is it fair? And then you're coming from it from an employer's perspective now. Yep,
absolutely. Yeah, I am now. It's totally different conversation from the other side, I guess. But there's a lot to, I guess, understand from both sides, and probably hearing it, your side of the fence, my side of the fence, it probably adds a lot of value and helps you recognize what's important to both parties.
Yeah.
So why don't we start with some of the excuses why people avoid having this conversation?
Yeah, so a few good ones I've heard and I've said to myself is the timing just isn't good right now. I mean, it might be because your company's got a lot going on, it's going through a restructure, all these sort of things. Maybe the market's down and you're working investments. So that's a common excuse people say. I work for a government agency or something to that ilk where you don't think you can negotiate because it's a set salary. This is my first job, so I don't want to ask for more and lose the offer altogether. The thought of negotiation makes me anxious and I don't know what to say. I mean, I don't think any of us do when we start because it's a skill. You just have to practice it and try, and it's something you just develop over your career. We're not naturally born to be able to negotiate our salary.
Totally. And that's a big one, right? If you're going for your first job, I don't know anyone that would be able to do that. Just go straight into negotiating. But, after a couple of years, you tend to get a feel for how things work in a business and know what your value is. Yeah.
A lot of the times the graduate salaries are kind of set.
Yeah.
For companies and graduate programs, there's not really any negotiation, but it's once you actually are adding value.
Yep.
I mean, that's sort of the thing. You're negotiating a salary increase because you're providing more value to the firm.
Totally.
And you're a more valuable asset, so you're worth more.
That's it. Exactly. Okay, so two more excuses that people might make.
Yeah, so my company is struggling, the economy is terrible, and everyone's getting laid off. And the final one, which I think I have said to myself and a lot of people I know have said, is if I just work harder, my boss, manager will notice me. And I think that's probably a big lie that we tell ourselves because they're just as busy as you are and they've got to worry about their own pay rise and salary increases and managing everything on their plate. They're not looking over your shoulder and remembering all those great things you've done. So you've got to, as we'll talk about later in this episode, you've got to sort of build a case that you can present to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's particularly in a medium or larger business, anything that more than 10 employees, that's probably hard. It's different. Like if you have like 3 employees or 2 employees, that's different. But yeah, if you're in a bigger business, that's something that you can't really just rely on that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about, I guess, tips for just even thinking about it. You've got some really interesting notes down here and kind of some things that are new to me, but I know that you've been through this experience recently.
Yeah.
So what were you thinking before you went into the job, the pay review kind of thing? What were you confident or?
Well, it was sort of the second year at the company, so I was probably a bit nervous, didn't really know what I could ask for. And companies don't go to you and say, most of the time, do you want this pay rise? Like they don't approach you with it on a silver platter. You actually have to sort of ask for what you want. And it's not a win-lose scenario. It's not like they win and you lose or you win and they lose. It's more of like, I don't know, tug of war. It's sort of a bit of give and take. Like you give something, they give something, and sort of negotiating in between. So they might have something, they might get told, your manager might get told they're able to increase employee salaries in your team by X amount, and they have to work out how to allocate it. They might be told they're allowed to give up to 10% more. So you probably won't know what they're allowed to negotiate for, and they might have to go up the level and negotiate on your behalf. So I think often they'll have a range, and maybe if you ask in the middle, they'll say yes straight away and you haven't asked for enough, or there might be reasons that they cannot give you anything, or there might be reasons why you deserve more. So I think the starting point is working out what you actually want and why you deserve it.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think that's working out what you want. And I think that's important, because if you hate your job, I'm just going to be real. If you hate your job, you're probably not going to be prepared to do the extra effort, to get there earlier, to try and think of creative strategies to get noticed and do all that type of stuff. So if that's the case, maybe this conversation isn't a big deal to you anyway. Maybe you can work on other ways. Like I think you told me recently that, you could think about putting extra time into work and extra effort into that, or you could use that extra time and effort for a side hustle.
Yeah.
And so you've got to think before you even have this conversation.
Yeah.
What's
so this
important
was
to you?
Months ahead.
Yeah.
Like planning ahead of your pay rise and thinking, where do you want to put that effort? Because usually to get a pay rise, you have to have improved on the last year and done something and provide more value. So if you're just an average employee that hasn't really done anything during the year, then maybe you don't have as much to argue for.
Mm-hmm. Totally. And we're going to come to this in a minute, but I think what's from my side of the table, just to lend some insight here, is it sounds really bad, but particularly when you get into a bigger business, we're not at this point yet, so I don't want anyone listening to think that this is why we think about it. But when you get into a bigger business, there are like policies and procedures for how much you can be paid. And I hate to say this, but sometimes employees are just looked at as numbers. This is our budget. This is what we can pay you. That's it.
Yeah.
And the only way to really get ahead in those situations is to make yourself invaluable.
Yeah.
And that's investing in yourself, investing in your knowledge, doing extra courses. Instead of maybe asking for a pay rise, it might be, what more responsibility can I take? That might be the first step. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of us. So
yeah, because your employer is really going, well, how much would it cost to replace that person?
That's it. And it's numbers.
If you take clients who, like, if they'd lose a whole lot of business if you left, or they wouldn't be able to fulfill a function for months because it takes ages to train someone or get someone with that skill set, then that is really increasing how valuable you are when you come to these negotiations. So I think, and coming back to working out what you want, it's thinking, what's your number? So I found this resource online that sort of broke it down into your 3 numbers. The wish number. So it's that crazy figure that you're kind of scared or embarrassed to even say out loud. So
200,000.
Yeah. Or maybe it's 10K or 20K on
Oh,
top
it's
of
the
your
same.
current
Okay.
salary.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah.
So
So if you're on a $50,000 and you want $10,000 more.
yeah,
Yeah.
for a firm, that's quite a big jump.
That's for sure it is. Yeah.
Then the want number, so the number you want to be paid. So maybe you're currently on 50 and you want to be 55.
Yep.
And so that
10%,
figure,
that's still good.
Yeah, so 10%
great.
increase, that's
Yeah.
better than inflation.
Yeah.
So this is the figure that's going to make you happy to go to work every day, that you feel it's a fair compensation for what you're doing
Mm-hmm.
and what you're getting paid.
It's like the best alternative to your wish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's what you'd think's fair,
Yep.
essentially. And then the walk figure. So I think this applied a little bit more to job offers and getting a job, but it's like the figure where you go, it's not worth me putting in all this effort for this figure.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. So maybe you're asking for 70 in getting a new job, and they're offering you 50, and you're like, well, I can get another job at 70. Why would I take 50?
Yep.
So it's the figure you'd walk away from.
Yep. I hear that. And that's kind of like, I guess that's knowing your value as well. You
Yeah.
have to understand like what you're worth. And if that's the case, then yeah, you have to be prepared to make that hard call. But obviously you don't have to tell them when you're in the salary review, if you're not going to give me this, I'm going to go. Because you do not want to put yourself in that situation.
No.
This is the kind of thoughts you have
And
to
that will
yourself
work
afterwards.
against
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. You want to be calm when you go into this. As
Yeah.
sensitive as it is, you want to go in, as we've got in the notes, just be very professional. Like you wouldn't want to go in there and just go all guns blazing saying, I'm not happy
Yeah.
with this, I'm not happy with that. By the way, I'd like a pay rise. You have to be really calculated, calm, take the feedback, give feedback, etc.
Yeah, because often pay rises are combined with annual reviews.
It's definitely that.
So there's a lot of other things happening in that conversation as well.
Yeah, because oftentimes they might even do things like anonymous surveys where you each survey each other, and then you go in, your manager talks to you about your weaknesses, your strengths, etc.
So something a curveball might throw off ball before you get to the pay conversation.
That's it. So they might even have this stuff in front of them and be like, so, given all of these, pieces of feedback, what do you think is fair? So you have to be prepared that,
Yeah, the conversation might not take the turn you expect.
That's it, yeah. So, okay, so we know, there's certain figures in mind. We're being professional. What's next?
So in part of that preparation for the conversation that you have at your annual review or for your pay rise, I think it's important to understand your audience and who you're actually discussing it with. Is it your manager? Do you have to discuss pay rises with the next level up? And also your industry, knowing what the going rate is for your job. Because
that's a good one.
If there isn't really much scope for what the particular role you do in your area above that, then to them, to your firm, they might go, oh, well, I can easily replace you in this area with someone of the same rate. So it's sort of knowing your industry and what is the salary. It might be a growing industry, or it might be an industry that's really competitive. So working out what is happening in the industry, and you can use websites like Glassdoor and things like that to work out what the average salary is for your job.
Glassdoor's a really good one for culture as well. I use it for investing to understand the culture of a business. If you ever want to find out more about the company's culture that you're thinking of applying to, don't just take what it says in the marketing documents. Actually go and get there's reviews on that.
Yeah, especially if it's a large organisation.
That's it, there'll be heaps. Yeah. That's really good. I was having a conversation with someone recently who was saying that he was on X and they did this, one of the guys at work did a big review of all like the sources online that say this person should get this much with this amount of pay. Because until then, the company hadn't actually thought about benchmarking itself to what others in the industry get.
Yeah.
They just thought, well, this is what we're paying, so therefore that should be right. But really, it was considerably more than that. And just by even having those resources to take to the management team and the HR team to be like, this is what we should be paid.
My role gets paid everywhere else.
Yeah.
Why am I 20K less? Because often your company doesn't know. They just sort of see it as numbers, as you said. They don't know that a computer developer is more valuable if they know this set of skills than if they know this set of skills or something.
That's it. Like the HR team setting the policies half the time don't know what that particular skill set is.
So you've got to do your research and also understand how pay works at your organisation. There might be a rule if there's 10% pay increase has to be taken to the board. Or something like, I know organisations in Australia like government and defence have very set out pay structures that are very transparent, so you see all the different levels and the steps. So do some research and understand how pay works. Maybe talk to some of your colleagues to see how they have approached the pay review in previous years, and how did the organisation deal with it, what was the process, because they don't just tell you this, and not usually unless it's a big company with a sort of a guide or a policy. It's sort of that unspoken stuff that happens at a company that you actually have to find someone who's been through it.
Yeah. There's often something called an EBA, Enterprise Bargaining Agreement. Okay. If you're part of like a trade union or if you're part of a particular industry, for example, there might be something that you can look up, and that is effectively what the company has to offer, and it might not be offering that, so you could kind of reference that. So that's a big one for construction industry and related industries, I guess.
And also, if you can, like, find out if your colleagues are happy to talk.
Yes. Yeah.
And even if they don't want to tell you the exact number, say, is your pay somewhere between 50 and 60 or 50 and 70, if they want to be a bit broader, to sort of get an understanding of what sort of brackets do your colleagues sit in, if they're comfortable talking with that. Because that often gives people a lot more power when it comes to the negotiation, because you suddenly find out your colleague with the same skill sets is getting 15K more than you. Well, why? Why is that? Maybe there's something you don't know about. Maybe they've got some extra qualifications or skill sets, but it might give you a bit more bargaining power.
Yeah, I think particularly if you speak to your colleagues, it's good to understand why. You touched on there. And sometimes it's because they've got a particular skill set, or they do something for the company that adds a lot of value.
Yeah, and you might not see that.
Yeah, exactly.
You just think they're doing the same thing as you.
Yeah, they've got the same title, therefore we should be on the same amount of money. They might have more experience, that's an obvious one. They might have a different qualification, but the other one is they might actually fulfill something on the side, and that's really important, because those are sometimes the jobs that management can't do for some reason. Yeah. Or they don't want to do. So if you can fulfill one of those tasks each week or what have you, chances are you're going to be you're going to be in a better position. So you want to just make your bargaining position better. And to that point, I remember we touched on something else. Being in the finance industry, there's this really highly sought after qualification, which is called the CFA, Chartered Financial Analyst. I remember when I was applying for a job and I was reading on and this was at a big bank, and the initial stage of interviews was with a recruiting team. So not even the branch or whatever it was, the people that you speak to. And they go, "Oh, I see you've got here CFA. Are you part of the fire brigade?" I was like, "What?"
And I mean,
that's
to
the hardest qualification in the world.
they were not going to value that qualification if they didn't know what it was.
That's it. They don't have the faintest idea what that means.
And also, like, the qualification, if you go and work at like a completely different industry, then that doesn't really bring value to them, what they would see. So you've actually got to sort of explain, not only do you have the qualification, but how will that qualification help them?
Apply. Absolutely. Okay. So we're coming to the back end of this, but what are some of the tips that people, or what are some of the strategies people can use going into the meeting?
Yeah. So I think definitely leading up a month or two before you have this conversation, you want to build a case for why you should have a pay rise. And whether that includes client feedback, if you print it out, or just during the year, if you have a folder in your inbox and just keep any client testimonials, feedback from other employees that actually shows what you've done. Keep records of any additional training, any additional responsibilities you've taken on during the year. Often we get jobs just dumped on us during the work year, and that's part of your case. Suddenly you're doing a couple of extra hours taking on this role. You've got to keep records of that. Maybe you've made improvements to the product. Keeping records of that, because that's sort of something that they won't remember. Suddenly, the product's better, but if you can keep lists of what you've actually done to improve that product or service. So because your manager won't recall everything you've done during the year.
That's a really good point.
So you've got to make it easy for them. And especially if they're going to have to advocate for your rise to higher up, to the board or to their own boss. So they're going to have to, you want to give them a really solid case for why you should have that pay rise, and just give them reasons and evidence to justify your request. Because just because you know your worth doesn't mean everyone else will.
Agreed. I got a really, and speaking of the manager advocating on your behalf, one piece of advice I got ages ago when I was younger was try and make friends with your boss's boss.
Yeah.
Because then your boss is in a position where they kind of like, I know, this is not a friend, but I know you guys are close. Like, can I get this pay rise over the line? And probably is. Like, it takes that friction away. So it's
there's a lot of, like, as much as it's supposed to be a very clean process, it's a lot of,
to be honest,
people have to go the extra mile for you often with these, and will they or won't they? Like, have you built those networks and things like that? So often, your manager won't, if you ask for something larger than they're able to give, they're going to have to go to the next level. So make it easy for them.
Absolutely. One of the things is, just be, even if you hate your job, it would probably be an important thing in the months leading up to this to be happy at work. Just to be a person that goes the extra mile, that tries to have a smile on their face, is kind of chirpy.
Because they're only going to remember the last few months.
That's it, yeah. Let's be honest, we're going to have monkey brains. We're not going to remember what you said 245 days ago. So just be really like, just...
Yeah, if you hate working there and it's obvious, well, why should they try to give you a pay rise or advocate on your behalf?
Exactly. Okay, so what's another tip?
So I think another one in terms of that pay rise conversation is being willing to compromise. So the company may only be able to increase it by X amount. Like, that might be the budget, and they just can't budge, and they try and they can't do it. So what other things are you happy to accept that are non-monetary but still something on top of what you're currently getting? So you might have 5 days of extra leave in compensation. So the company doesn't have the cash, but they can give you the leave. Maybe it's additional training. So often training budgets come out of a completely different area of the company. So I want $1,000 of training. It could be a different bonus or commission scheme. It could be equity in a company, especially if it's a smaller startup company. Often schemes like that are going on. It might be an afternoon off each month. Like, get creative, I think.
I think you just touched on something. I'm surprised not many people know about this, and that's equity in a company. So there's more ways than one for you to be rewarded.
Yeah.
And one of those is a thing called equity, and that is effectively ownership in a business. And the way that tends to work is, not always, but the way it tends to work is you earn it out over time.
Yeah.
So they might say to you, you can have 1% of the company if you stay with us for the next year. Yeah. And that immediately you might be like, well, why would I take that? Well, in time, the company could be very profitable, and you can be effectively a partner in the business and earn money from that.
And in some circumstances, if the company does well, taking the equity instead of the pay rise can really make you a lot richer over the long term.
Oh, yeah. That's how... Yeah. Look at all the richest people in the world. They didn't get rich by earning an income. They own parts of businesses.
Yeah.
That's how they got there.
Like, if you think the company's going to do well and you can be part of it, then maybe equity is something you want to ask for. And I have seen cases where it's been successfully negotiated that instead of taking X amount of pay, they'll take a lesser amount, but 1%, 2% equity of the company.
And that's, as a small business owner myself, that's something that I have to do, or I have to consider, to attract really good people. Because I don't have a huge budget to go and take the top whatever from some industry and then bring them over. I have to attract them with other things, be more creative, flexible work arrangements, whatever. So don't forget about those little things, because they go a long way.
Yeah, that flexible working is another big one that you could say, well, I want to work 2 days from home. And that saves you a lot of time. You get a lot of hours of your day back from lunch break and travel.
Travel's a big one, 2 hours a day for some people. It doesn't cost the company anything.
Yeah.
So if someone came to me and said, I want 10 grand or I want to work from home for one day, I'm going to be like, well, of course you can work from home for one day. Why would I go with the other option? But it's totally true. You might not think that can have a huge impact on your happiness. You might not think it, but it can. Yeah. So don't underestimate that.
Yeah. And the last thing I wanted to say is practice before you go in with a trusted friend or family member that'll keep it to themselves. Maybe not a colleague, because it might, depending on your work environment, it might not be appropriate. But practice explaining your case and why you should get that pay rise and what you want. And how will you react if your manager just turns around to you after you've laid it all out and goes no? or they change the topic of the conversation, or what if they don't even bring it up and they just say, okay, we're done, and how are you going to bring up that topic of pay? And what's your plan of attack? So going through some of these scenarios with trusted friend or family member beforehand will put you in much better stead for the actual conversation, because if you've practiced it, they haven't practiced it probably, but they know what they want, you know what you want, and you're much more confident going in.
Yep, that's some great advice, Kate. I think just reflecting back on this episode, some of the things are, know what you want and don't be ashamed to ask for it. You know, you want to be happy every day you go to work. And if you're not happy, find out why and just try and fix that.
Yeah.
I know that's easier said than done, but it's the truth. You spend a third of your life at work.
Yeah.
Maybe just a little bit less if you include weekends.
You end up knowing your colleagues better than your family.
Yeah. So honestly, just know what you want. Be prepared to fight for it.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to, we said be professional.
Yeah, absolutely.
But just go for it. Give it a shot.
No,
the worst they can do is say no and shut you down.
Yeah. And then you go back to the drawing board and try and work out a compromise.
That's it.
Because it's not like they'll have some room to budge probably, or they might have room to budge with non-monetary items. So it's building a case and sharing why you deserve that pay rise, and maybe not being afraid to ask for the scary number. I mean,
why not?
They might shoot down the scary number, but they might settle on a number that was higher than what you were going to ask for in the first place. So it's worth a shot.
Absolutely it is. And like you said at the start of the show, it is great financial advice is to just try it, because if you get it, hey, big win. Yeah.
And you've got years to practice. But if you start from early on in your career, once you're a few years into your first job and you've built some value at the company, it's a really good skill to build. And it works for other areas of finance. You'll be negotiating your home loans. You'll be negotiating contracts in no time.
If you can do your pay, you can do pretty much anything.
Yeah. That's probably one of the scariest conversations people have to have. So
absolutely it is. So good luck. I'd love to hear from anyone. If they hear this, they go and have a chat with their boss, and good or bad.
Yeah.
Hopefully good.
Yeah.
We expect it to be good, but that's all right if it's not. But we want to hear
the
what you have to say.
real life stories.
Yeah, that's it. Cool. All right. Wonderful episode, Kate. Thanks for joining me.
No worries.